welcome everybody. Glad you guys are here. And we're going to go ahead and get started. Kay Spears is giving our presentation today. She is our in-house photo editing, photo identifying expert. Anything to do with photos, we go straight to Kay. So she is a perfect one to be giving this program. And I'm going to facilitate by asking any questions you guys may have in the chat in real time during this program. So make sure you ask us questions. Thanks, Kay.
Okay, thank you, Allison. So, hi everybody. I hope everybody's having a nice evening. It's really nice and sunny here. No storms. So we're going to talk about Adobe Elements version 2018. I've been using Elements for quite a while, and Elements came along in about 2004 as the less expensive product from Adobe. So it is possible that you might have an Adobe Elements on your computer that is a totally different version than what I have. They release versions every year. So there have been 2 more released since I got the one that I am now using. And in our workroom, in our workspace, we have a number of different versions. We have version 6 and 9 and 12, and they all still work on Windows 10. So if you've got an old version, and if it's working for you, you don't really need to buy a new one. There are some things that I'm going to show you that you may not have, and there are some things out there that I don't have. There are going to be 5 of these sessions, and I'm going to talk about different things in each session. And I'm going to start with a basic enhancement tonight. So let's look at my workspace that I have. There are a lot of tools in Adobe. Up at the top are the drop-down boxes, just like any menu in any software program that you have. And when you click on them, they have all of these things that you can do. One of the more important ones is the revert or the undo. And this is, by the way, on a Windows. So all of my keystrokes are the control. On Mac, I believe they're command, but I'm not sure. You would have to do a little digging to find out about the Mac. So up here at the menu is the image, enhance, layer, select, filter, view, window, and if you accidentally turn off some of your tools, this is where you go to turn them back on again. Not that it ever happened to me. Then there is the help. Something that if you have an older version of Elements that you may not have is this right here. These are some tabs, and the Adobe people decided to divide things up and put them in different tabs. This eLive gets you to their website and to their tutorials. This is the Quick tab, and when I click on the Quick tab, you'll see that I don't have all that many tools over here or over here on my right. So this is a basic tab. On the Guided tab, and this is a tab that we will get into in one of the later sessions. This is also a tutorial. And there are different categories in here for different things that you need to do. And it's supposed to help you learn how to do things in Adobe Elements, but there are some things in here that are not very intuitive, and some of the instructions kind of might leave you scratching your head and wondering what they're trying to tell you to do. And then the last tab is the Expert tab. And since I use this a lot and I'm familiar with the other products of Adobe, I usually go in here to Expert right away because it's got all of my tools that I'm going to use. Over here on the left are some more tools. And when I click on one of these tools, well, before I say what I'm going to do when I click, down here at the bottom is a bin. And let me open up some images so we can see what the bin does. And you notice what it did when you are in the expert mode for this version. It doesn't open it up at the max when you open up an image. That doesn't do that in all the versions of Adobe. In some of the older ones, it opens them up at the max. So down at the bottom, now that I have two images open, is what is called the bin. And when I click on each one of these images, that is the image, it's highlighted in blue, and that is the image that is active. If I click on this one, that is in blue. This is the one I'm going to work on. And over here in the palette, this is the one that's showing on the palette. Now, if I want to use one of my tools over here, and I click on this one, this is the Lasso Selection tool, my bin changes to the tool option. So every time I click on one of these, the bin will change to that particular option, and I can adjust my tools accordingly. Another tool that I'm going to talk about in the enhancements is the layer palette, and that's over here on the right. And that is something that I use quite a lot, the layer tool. I also use it as a last minute problem solver when I have something that I can't enhance the way I want to. I will use that layer. So I have opened up two images, and both of these images have what I would call, and by the way, this is what I'm doing here. I'm floating. I like to work with my images floating. These both are faded. The one is worse than the other. So we're going to start on the simple one first. And everybody works differently. I always like to get the easy things out of the way first before I tackle any hard things. And each image has its own unique problem. And what works in solving that problem for one image will not work for another. So when you look at your images and you want to correct them, or you want to restore them, or you want to retouch them, you need to figure out exactly what the problems are. That way you don't get as easily frustrated. And I like to encourage people when they're using elements that you really need to play with it. You need to see what it does, and you need to have fun with it. And sometimes when you're having fun, though, you need to remember what you did to get it that way. So let's start with the easy correction. and it's this photograph here. The biggest thing that's wrong with this one, other than that the original photograph was blurry, is that it's fading. And I'm going to zoom in on a little so that we can see what it looks like close up. So I'm going to show you all the different tools that you can use to fix this faded photograph, and there are lots of them. Since we are going to enhance it, we're going to go up here to the Enhance menu, and we're going to click on it. When we click on it, we have a lot of things that we can use. We have, first of all, right at the very top, we have automatic things that they've provided us so that we don't really have to do any work. In this case, there are 4 that I want to point out. We're going to do the levels, which is one of my favorite tools. We're going to look at the contrast, and I want to say something about the color correction. The color correction needs to be used very lightly because it does have a tendency to make things fuzzy. The automatic sharpen it's made to make fuzzy things sharper, or things that are blurry sharper. But you have to be very careful when you're using it because you can go overboard. And I'm going to click on it, and I want you to look at the image and to see what happens, how it's kind of out of focus right now. But I'm going to click on it, and it just popped just a little, and that's okay. If I kept doing this, eventually it's going to look not very good. And I get odd things that start happening, and I don't want to do that. So I'm going to go back in time. I'm going to Control Z, and I should be back where I started. I think I have one more. Yes. So those are the sharpen and the color correction. If you use them lightly. So let's look at these automatic buttons. Let's look at the automatic contrast button. I'm going to click on it and watch the image. Ta-da! So maybe I'm done, and maybe I can move on to another project because it looks pretty good to me. At least on my computer, it looks good. What you need to do is remember that your computer makes things look better than they are, and because of the resolution. So you should get in the habit of printing things out to see what they actually look like, and then maybe go back and adjust them. But that's just a little tip. So that's one tool to enhance.
Hold on.
Yes.
Someone asked, how did you undo that? And then a response was she used Control Z.
Yes, and that's a Windows shortcut, Control Z. I believe, I don't know what it is if you've got a Mac computer. I think it's Command Z, but I'm not positive.
I did ask our Mac user, it's Command.
Thank you. I'm glad there's one. Okay.
I did that on purpose, but
okay.
There's another question too.
Okay.
It says, should you first save the photo with a different name and work on the copy?
I'm sorry. Yes, you should. You should always, and that's why you shouldn't be afraid when you're in here working with these things, is because you should always work on a copy. You never use the original, and it should be a TIFF. And when you're done with it, if you want to make it into a JPEG, you can do that, but always work on a TIFF and a copy. So let's look at the, good question. auto level. I'm going to click it.
Okay, before you get further, we have another question.
Yes, yes, yes.
How do you get the photos in the bin?
Oh, as soon as you open them up, they arrive there automatically. You can close, you know, normally I do not pay attention to the bin, and sometimes I turn it off. You can turn it off if it becomes irritating to you. It all depends on how you work. It does come in handy, and I can show you something I was going to save for later, but for instance, and this doesn't have anything to do with enhancing, it comes in handy if I wanted to put another photograph in here in one of these, and I had all these photographs down here on the bin, I could just drag this photograph that I wanted into another photograph and drop it, or I could do it from over here in the or the layer palette. I could drag it and drop it. But that's something for later. But anyway, so back to enhancing. The bin is automatically there, but you can turn it off if you want to. Sometimes you want a bigger workspace. So let's go back.
Okay, another question.
Yes.
I'm going to keep interrupting.
That's okay.
When you scan or download a picture, do you save it as a JPEG or a TIFF? Where does it go when it gets saved?
You save your photographs always as a TIFF. And it goes where you store your photographs at. You should have something like an external hard drive or a number of different things to put your images on, and you don't want to really store them on your computer because they do take up a lot of space. So I have mine on a number of different external hard drives right now. And if I lose one of them, I have backups. I have, I'm going to stretch it here. I have a gazillion backups, but I don't really have a gazillion, but anyway.
I understand, you got to back things up.
You have to back things up.
Okay, so another question. I've never floated my pics. How is that done as opposed to being in the work area?
It is in the preferences when you go in here, and depending on what version you have as to where it's located at, there is a preference here, and you can go in here and change how you want the images to appear. There is also a thing up here that in this particular version doesn't necessarily always work. In my Windows or my Elements 9, this works. So sometimes there's like these little bugs that the Element software has, but so you can float it from here by checking one of these, or you can go change your preferences. I would be a little bit leery when you change your preferences. And just remember, when you change your preferences, what I've experienced with changing preferences in Adobe, at least this version, is every time they push an upgrade, all of my preferences that I set go away and I have to redo them all. But that's just a little bump in the road. So,
would you recommend saving your pictures to a flash drive?
No, not if you're going to keep them. Flash drives corrupt pretty easily. So you should have them in a better permanent electronic device that's pretty secure. Flash drives, you know, they're nice to carry around if you're going from one place to another and you're not going to keep them there permanently. You know, we used to save everything on CDs and DVDs, but as we know, those are all going away. There used to be such a thing as floppy drives, and those have all gone the way. So you kind of have to watch technology when you're saving your valuable images. Okay, I'm going on. Going on here. The next tool for the enhancement and is down here in the adjust lighting. We have 3 tools. Now let me move this over here just a little. We have shadows and highlights, brightness and contrast, and levels again. When I click on the shadows and highlight, it will automatically change my photograph. Now, it also leaves a dialog box, and I have make sure you've always got your preview checked so you can see what you're doing. I can play with these sliders and change the appearance of what was automatically done. So that's one of the tools. And let's go back to the adjust for lighting. And we have the brightness and contrast. Most programs, even Microsoft Word has brightness and contrast in it. You move the bars. And this is when you are controlling what you want. Now, my favorite tool, levels, which we saw the automatic one earlier. But now this one's a little bit different. And this has a lot of things in this dialog box that you can do. Over here, in what looks like a graph, are 3 little things that look like a triangle. A black point, a gray point, and a white point. And when they talk about gray, they don't necessarily mean gray because you can have a dark gray. They just mean it's the middle. It's the difference between the black and white. So you always start with the gray, and you're going to move that slider bar, and it changes right away. So you move it to a point that you're happy with, and then in this case, I'm going to move the black, and it's going to make it darker. Now, I am not going to do, well, I'll show you what happens with the white. Sometimes the white can be a little overpowering, and I'll show you, it may not do anything. But here we go. So it does things that, in this case, I don't need. So let's reset this back to the normal here. I don't usually use this. This is what it does. We have eyedroppers. And once again, we have a black eyedropper, a gray eyedropper, and a white eyedropper. I love the eyedroppers. So let's click on the gray eyedropper. And you go over and you look at your image and you try to find something that's in the middle. You try to find what you think is a gray area. And this is going to be pretty subtle. You go over, I'm going to go right here to what I think is a good gray, and I'm going to click on that area. Now, I don't know if everybody saw it, but it changed just slightly. It's got a kind of a bluish, at least on my screen, it has kind of a bluish tint to it. So I'm going to go back to the black one. And now I'm going to find an area in the photograph that's dark. And that could be this area here, this shadow, this hand, her lips, her eyes, her hair, some kind of a dark area. And I'm going to click the photograph. And it popped. Now I can try the white, but I'm not going to. If I think this is too dark, I can go back to this and do some adjustments again. Have fun with these things. And because you are using a copy, don't be afraid of anything that might be a mistake. You need to learn from your mistakes. So that is the enhancement tools from up here. Now let's look at things that I do if I'm stuck. We're going to use the same photograph. It's in the layer palette. There's some amazing toys over here in the layer palette. Right now, this image says background. And most images will always, when they open up, they will say background, but we're going to change it to a layer and we're going to name it. You can get, I believe, 8,000 layers in your layer palette. So you need to learn to keep track of them.
Hey, Kay.
Yes.
There's a question.
Okay.
Did you mention the channel drop down? What are the other options in channel besides RGB?
I did not mention the channel drop down because that's more of an advanced one. Was that in the levels? Who asked that? If we had a color photograph, we're going to be doing color photographs the next session. You could get into the channel and do some adjustments to just certain colors. Like if you've got a problem with the red color, you can adjust it, or the green color, or the blue color. But that's what that would be mainly for. Now, I could probably, when I save my images, even like in this case, it's a black and white image, I always save them as color. So this particular image has RGB, red, green, blue. And you can adjust, well, we'll put a red here. And we'll see what it does to my black photograph. So even though it's black, you can use these channels. But usually I save that for some time later because the channels are interesting things to use. There's a trick that I'll tell you that you can do with the bigger Adobe Photoshop that sometimes you're a little limited in elements, and that's using, say for instance, somebody marked on your photograph with the blue pen. You can go into that channel where I don't think you can do that in elements, but in the other Photoshop, you can delete that blue channel and get rid of that mark if most of it is blue. Did I confuse everybody on that? But that's the channels. The channels are very powerful, and I don't believe that, I think this is the only way, at least in my version, that you can get to those channels is through here. In the bigger version of Adobe, the more expensive one, you actually have something like the layer over here on the right where you have the channels laid out in front of you, and you can turn the channels off and on. But anyway, that's a little bit off the channel, and I don't mean to get distracted. Did I answer? Hopefully I answered that question. But I would use it mainly for color photographs. So anyway, back to the layer here. So I'm going to make another layer. I'm going to call it top. It's the top layer. So I have 2 layers now. When you change them, you can move these layers once they get over here. Once you get more than 1 layer, you can move it. I can move my top layer down to my bottom, or move it back. So I do have that option. It's very helpful to be able to move these sometimes. Whatever is highlighted when I'm on the palette, that is the layer that I'm working on. I can also turn them off by turning off these eyes. But what I wanted to show you that I sometimes use when I'm enhancing is this little drop-down box right here. This is a filter. It is also what it does do to the image or to the layer that you're working on is it makes it sort of transparent. And I'm going to skip down here because I know what the darken does. Each one of these do different things, but I'm going to click on the multiply. And when I did that, it changed the image for me. So if you're having trouble enhancing or using the level or the contrast, you can always go over here and try one of those filters. I suggest that you go through each filter. Some of them do some interesting things, and you can use them in combination with each other too. So that is another option that's open for you when you're fixing things. So that's it for this image. I'm going to move it out of the way. And let's close that one. So we've got this image. And your first initial reaction should be that it's pretty faded. That's the thing that I see when I look at it.
Hey, Kay.
Yes.
For some reason, the other image is still on top.
It is?
Mm-hmm.
Well, we'll close it.
There we go.
Okay.
It was almost like the screen froze. Yeah. Somebody else.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But also somebody had a question.
right.
She's asking if you're still using the Lasso tool.
Am I still using the Lasso tool? I'm not using, no, I've got, it looks like I have one of the spot healing tools chosen. Why? I can go back to the, because I am going to go back to the Lasso tool.
Somebody was just asking.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to use the Lasso tool. Okay, so we have this image. I'm going to zoom in on it a little. It's pretty badly faded. So if I go back and do my normal routine on this one, I'm going to do the automatic first. It's the one I always do first. It enhances it, and then I see that there are more problems with this photograph than just a simple fade problem. And I'm not sure if it's dark enough for everybody to see on their computer. But up in this area, looks like there might have been some kind of bacteria or something. It appears that there was something that was laid on it. There's some water stains. There are all kinds of problems with this photograph. And not only that, but I'm going to really zoom in on this photograph. Oops. Keep zooming. And you should be seeing little lines. Lots of little lines. This image has major problems. And do we know what causes these little lines? And she has no mouth. These little lines are caused because the original photograph was saved as a JPEG, and people worked on this and saved it as a JPEG, and these are called Jpeg artifacts. And this is why you don't do Photoshop restoration or retouching with a JPEG, because it will eventually end up looking like this. So that is something that will not be corrected, because you can't correct that. And this is, yes.
What did you click on to enhance it?
The automatic level. It's the one I always start with, the automatic level, because sometimes I'm lazy, and that does, sometimes I'm happy with what the automatic level does. So anyway, we have this image. And from what I understand, the only copy of it anymore is the JPEG. This does say it's a TIFF, and that's because I changed it to a TIFF. And there's also some kind of a thing going on over here I just noticed. I believe this is what might be a silver highlight problem. But so when you get your images and you start working on them, you have to remember, you have to have an attitude that it's something that you're going to enjoy doing. And you can't become frustrated that there's something you can't fix. There are just some things that aren't fixable. So you have to get it, you need to get it to the point that you're happy with it and just move on. Because, yes.
We have a couple questions about saving. So one question is, so do you scan from this program to save a picture?
Yeah, these images are, I think the question is, these images have all been, they were scanned on most of them on a flatbed scanner. Is that what we're, and then they were saved as, well, in this case, they were saved as a JPEG. But they should be saved as a TIFF. Was that the question?
No, can you scan from this program?
Can I scan from this program? Oh, I believe I can. I think there's maybe not. I'm not sure. I never have. Some of them you can hook up to the scanner, I believe, and scan directly on it. I'm not sure. I've never tried it.
What do we normally use for scanning?
We use a flatbed. I can see that you can do open in a camera raw, so there must be a way to scan. I'll have to check that out and see, because I'm really not sure about that because I've just never done that.
That's fair.
Okay.
So another question is, why can't you save images as JPEGs if altering?
Because you get, a JPEG is a lossy, it compresses things. And when it compresses something, it starts taking things away. And in the example of this one, the reason why it's got these things on it is because it was saved as a JPEG. Those are all caused by saving as a JPEG. You cannot put, or you shouldn't put, a TIFF online. If you have a blog or you got a website or you're going to send it through email, a TIFF is going to be too big. It will lock everything up. So in that case, you want to have a JPEG to put on your website or your blog or Facebook. Those should all be JPEGs. So you do what you want in Elements and you save it as a TIFF, or you save it as the PSD, whatever comes with Adobe. And then you convert it to a JPEG. And I believe when you save it, there's even an option here to save this for the web. And the options that come up when you save it for the web are JPEG and PNG. I don't know if there's a GIF or a GIF in there, but those are the options. I'll bring it up. You get this option. And you can save it as a JPEG, and here are the other choices. And that converts it to a smaller file. But you have already, that would be when you're done doing whatever it is that you're going to do, whatever it is you're going to fix or add to it. You've already saved it as a TIFF. So you always have, first of all, you have the original photograph that you're not going to touch, and then you have a copy of that, which is a TIFF. And that you're going to save it in case you have to go back to that image.
And you can just save the JPEG as a TIFF in Elements, right?
What was your question? You can save it, pardon, what? Say that again.
You can just save it as, so if you originally have a JPEG image, you can save it as a TIFF within Elements.
Yes, yeah. You have okay, I'm going to get distracted here. The only time you may have a problem with saving certain things is once upon a time, there was such a thing called bitmap. And that's a term that's used, it's kind of a generic term now, but there are some things that you open, they say bitmap, and you may not be able to convert those to JPEGs because it's got a lower depth. And Adobe doesn't like certain depths. And so if there's something that you have that you can't save it to a JPEG, you need to go in and look over here to see. And if it says bitmap, change it to either the grayscale or the RGB. But anyway, I got distracted there.
Well, I'm going to distract you a little more.
Okay.
Somebody made a comment that Ancestry will only accept JPEG, and that's true because the TIFFs are way too large. So that is part of the issue. So as you already said, if it's online, it's going to be a JPEG.
Yes.
The other thing, there's a discussion about saving JPEGs still. So JPEGs, it drops pixels, right?
Yes.
And that's why it becomes an issue over time. And it's not
over,
good.
Yes, over time it will become an issue.
And that's why you shouldn't do the editing with those, correct?
Correct.
So it's better to do a TIFF and then convert it to a JPEG if you're going to put it online.
Correct. And you know, there are some really high resolution JPEGs. But if you're going to do anything with them, if you're going to restore or retouch them up, anything that involves pressing the save button, they need to be a TIFF. So if you've got a high resolution JPEG and you're going to work on it, save it as a TIFF and then work on it.
Well, and just another point very quickly is industry standard for archival is TIFF.
Correct.
So, okay, continue.
Okay, all right. So this lasso button. Now, I'm going to be drawing around this pot here with my lasso, and I'm going to be using a mouse to draw with. And using a mouse to draw with is not one of the better tools out there. Oops, as you can notice. But we're not going to go back. We're going to be happy with that. So I held my left key down on my mouse to draw this lovely thing around my pot that I have. I have now selected this pot. And you can tell that I've selected it because it has this marching, what I call marching ants around the pot. And I can do a couple of different things. I can work directly on the photograph, which is not, you really shouldn't do that. Or I can go over here and right click, and I can go up here to the layer via copy. And over in my layer palette, I now have another layer, and it's got a tiny little dot in it, and that's the pot that I just selected. So when you enhance something, the whole thing gets enhanced. But maybe you don't want to enhance everything. So that's what we're going to do now, is we're going to just enhance that pot. So we can enhance it there. We can go over here and try some more of these filters. Let's do a color burn. Ah, it's a little bit too dark. So you can do whatever you want to whatever you have selected, and it's not going to do anything to the original image. And you can do whatever. We can do it again to the leaf. You have to make sure you're on the right layer. So now we have 3 layers, and I'm going to lose track of which ones I'm with, but this would be the leaf. And let's do an overlay. So we've done something to that leaf now. So that is another way to just enhance certain parts of the photograph. This comes in handy if you have a diary or a journal. In my experience, books, old diaries and old letters and old journals, they don't scan very well. They don't scan flat. A lot of them have, if you've ever seen a Civil War diary or anything, a lot of them may have issues. They have maybe water problems, and some things you can read and some things you can't. And being able to select just certain portions of that to enhance comes in handy.
So we have a question.
Yep.
Is there anything you can do for her missing mouth?
Well, this is all, well, this part of the sessions is all about restoring. You could maybe find somebody's mouth and put on there. If you actually knew what her mouth looked like when she was alive, you could maybe try to put a mouth on there. That's the only way I know of, but then you've got a fake mouth. So there's not a good way to repair her mouth, at least not in Adobe. I don't know if there's some pixel program out there that can magically get in there and see what was once there. Adobe can't do that.
Okay.
Okay, and that is all I was going to talk about with the enhancement, at least with the black and white. The next session, which is next week, I'm going to go into color, which is a little bit more complicated, which is why I wanted to start out with the enhancements, because I consider these a little bit more easier to do. And if you're just beginning, it's less frustrating. And then we're going to, in one of the sessions, we'll be talking about the clone tool and all the different varieties of clones that you can use. And there are, the cloning is a lot of fun. Well, I have a lot of fun with Adobe. Adobe's fun. I like Adobe. It's like a marriage. It's fun, but sometimes it's frustrating. So
I like that.
thank you.
We're getting questions, by the way.
Okay, and then we're going to have taking a photograph apart and putting photographs back together. A couple of different kinds of things to tear apart and put together. And then the last session will be some exploring some of the fun things that Adobe's given us, some bizarre things they've given us, and some things to do to make, to release your creative artist that's deep down inside of you. Oh.
And as we're answering these, you're willing to answer questions via email if somebody has something very specific that doesn't get addressed during this, correct?
Correct. Oh,
so genealogy@acpl.info.
Yeah, I did want to say that one of the harder things to correct is a photograph that someone else has retouched. Sometimes there are some interesting things that people have put on there, like fake hands, and those are hard to create or to fix.
Okay, so the first one is, so when you save it as a JPEG and you lose some parts of the images, there's nothing you can do to restore it.
Not as far as I know. That's why you've got a copy. That's why you have your original TIFF that you're not going to ever touch. That's why you are working on a copy. You're working on a TIFF copy of the original TIFF. So you always have a backup. And that's why when you take things off of the web, if you go into somebody's website and you see an image and you copy that, you download it to your own computer, a lot of those images you'll notice are fuzzy or out of focus, or there's something, they're not sharp, and that's because most of them are JPEGs. They might be PNGs. PNGs are better, but JPEGs are not good for archival.
Okay. Next question, what about the mold marks? Can you get rid of them?
I would have to say in this case, it would maybe we could get rid of some of them, but it would take quite a while because there are a lot. You know, if there was just one or two, it would be just a simple matter of cloning those out. But there's a lot of them, so you would have to replace. You would have to have something good to cover the something bad, which is the bacteria. You would have to have a good pixel to cover the bad pixel. So it would take a long time. And you may have other photographs that you want to enhance.
Okay. Since drawing with a mouse for selections is not as precise as you'd like, what other tools are available?
Well, in Adobe, there's, what is that little, there's like a pencil thing that I'm sure the Disney Studio has that you can draw on your screen. Adobe, I don't think it comes with that, or I've never heard of it coming with Adobe. But when you're doing this, and I was doing it kind of fast, down here on the bottom, you can, since I've got the Lasso tool open, when you're actually drawing it, you have some options down here, and you can add to the selection, subtract to the selection, or interact. So you can, if you make a mistake, you can use some of these tools to take that line away. So that's available. So you can get a little bit more precise. You could also, and I'm going to get distracted here again. There is another tool that helps refine the edges. And if you right click, there's a feather tool. And when you use that, this is set at 2, but you set it at certain pixels, and that kind of refines the edge of that circle. So there are some options to making your selection, when you're drawing that selection, look a little bit better. But it's not a, drawing with a mouse is not a fast thing. It's not as fast as having a paintbrush in your hand or a pencil.
Well, and one of the things I just thought I would follow up is people can get, if you really want to get into this, you can get digital pens, and you'll have to have some sort of tablet or a touchscreen computer to use the digital pen on. And that's what a lot of artists, professional graphic designers use. But they're expensive, just FYI.
Yeah.
So I have seen them. I've seen them in work, and they look really cool, but
yeah,
I'm not going to be able to afford one.
Yeah, I've seen them too. And they are neat, but I don't have one.
Yeah. So somebody's asking what the benefit of copying onto a layer versus just updating the picture is.
Because, well, okay, you can always, okay. First of all, you've got your original, so if you make a mistake, you can start over again. You also have the Control Z that backs up the history. It's just easier when you've got a layer and you've made a number of mistakes. Instead of going through the Control Z, just put the layer in the trash and start all over again. That's one of the benefits of doing that by layer.
So it's basically making your life easier.
Yeah, and plus if you want to work on it, you know, if you're saving it as a TIFF or if you're saving it as the format that comes with it, you're going to open it up again and work on it at a later time. You won't be able to do any, and you've saved it, and so you're coming back another day. You cannot go back and do a Control Z to correct your mistake because you've saved it and it closed your computer down. But if you put it on a different layer and you've saved it as your TIFF and you open it up the next day and you decide not to have that there, you can, that layer is still going to be there and you can delete that layer the next day.
Awesome. So this is Adobe Photoshop Elements 18, correct?
2018.
Okay.
There have been 2 since then.
Okay, just verifying. And then several people have asked if this is going to be posted again. It is going to be posted on YouTube at a later date. They have to be updated and then they go into the queue for our marketing department to put online. They have a calendar, they go by their calendar. We have no control over that. The YouTube is on our website, so genealogycenter.org. If you go to the genealogy community, you'll see all of our different social media platforms, and then YouTube is at the bottom. It is the ACPL YouTube. It's called Ask ACPL. If you scroll down a little bit, you'll be able to see the genealogy videos. So anything that we've done already, you'll be able to see those. And then let's see here. Somebody's asking about recommendations to Photoshop, Elements versus CC. I think that's Creative
Suite.
Lightroom.
I don't use Lightroom. I have Creative Suite on my computer or my workspace. I also have Elements on my workspace. I've used Creative Suite. I don't even want to mention the year, but it was before 2000. The advantage, the Photoshop that comes in Creative Suite has more things. It's hard to believe that they could have more tools and more ways to getting into the image than Elements. But, you know, and you can make actions, except I believe that you can make actions now in Elements, but you couldn't when they first started. It's getting, in my opinion, Elements is getting closer to the big Photoshop program, which is in Creative Suites, which is more expensive, which is why we like Elements. The interesting thing, when I was deciding what to put on my own laptop, is now when you go into Adobe, you don't have to buy the entire Creative Suite. You can pick and choose which ones you want out of it. So if you wanted to get their Adobe Photoshop instead of their Adobe Elements, you could. So I'm not sure what was the original question.
Just asking for recommendations. Which one?
Oh, it kind of depends. In the Creative Suite, when I'm using anything from the Creative Suite, there is their Photoshop program, which is one of the, it's one of the premier, it's a wonderful program. They're the Photoshop that's in Creative Suite. You also have Illustrator in there and a program called InDesign, and there are some other web things that are in there. I think, I'm not sure if Acrobat's part of it. It used to be part of that too. But you can break those out. I only use, out of all the things that are in that suite, I only use Illustrator, InDesign when I'm forced to, and the Acrobat and the Photoshop. The web things I don't use that are in that. So I think it's a kind of a neat thing that they've finally allowed you to take the ones that you actually want. You can, and you can lease them for they have all these different plans, and you can get, if all you want is Illustrator and Photoshop, that's all you need to get.
Okay. So I also did a Google search because I'm a librarian and like to look things up.
Okay.
So because Lightroom is something you haven't really used, I thought I would look at it. And multiple people are saying Elements is more for the photographer, the professional photographer, or no, the amateur photographer, and Lightroom is better suited for the professional photographer.
Okay.
And they're also saying that Photoshop Elements also has a basic organizer with tools for printing, creating albums, galleries, calendars, slideshows, etc.
Right.
So Lightroom is more for a professional photographer, whereas Elements is better suited towards people like me.
Well, the reason why there's an Elements is because originally when this came along, and when there were two brothers that created Adobe, or they created a Photoshop program. They created it in 1988, by the way. And it got to be quite pricey. And there were people that wanted to do things with their photographs, just like what that was in their original expensive creation that they made. So Elements, that's why they created Elements, was so that people could afford to do some of the things that they were doing. And if you are going to do professional things, then you probably need to get the Creative Suite. And you probably, even though I hate to say this, you probably need, if you're going to do anything professional in graphics, you probably need to be on a Mac. But that's my opinion. But I've used Windows all of my life.
Okay. And she's also asking if a monthly payment or buying outright would be a better choice. I think that's a personal choice.
That's a personal choice. I bought, I have a lease, or what do I have a lease on? I did a number of different things. I was so thrilled that I could do a whole bunch of different things. I bought the Elements outright, and I believe I have a lease on Illustrator, because I wasn't sure how much I would be using it at home as opposed to here at work. So it gave me the option of realizing that, yeah, I still need Illustrator. So.
Okay. So we have a question. Can you group save JPEGs to TIFFs?
Well, that's going to be in one of the in one of the other sessions. The answer is yes. If you've got 500 TIFFs and you want to change them into 500 JPEGs, there is a way. And
And even changing them from JPEGs to TIFFs?
you may do that also.
Awesome. Yay.
Yes.
Okay, so somebody said, thank you. I took a 6-week Adobe Photoshop class in 2009. I have, she has 2020 now, and this is a good refresher updater. And then Aletha, she says that she got Photoshop CS 5.1 and just discovered when I purchased a new Mac desktop that it will not run on my new machine because the new one is 64-bit and my 9-year-old version of Photoshop is only 32-bit. Be careful if you decide to upgrade your computer. Oof.
Yeah. Yeah, be careful when you upgrade those computers because make sure that what you're buying is compatible. When we change them out here, we always get kind of nervous because we don't know how much longer some of the Adobe products will be compatible. So far they are. The oldest one we have here at our workplace is a version 6, and it's still working. And I think we're lucky.
Yeah, no, that's really good. Okay, so we also have a very interesting thank you, ladies. Does anybody else have any questions? I hope everybody is able to join us again for the next session. And Kay, I'm going to go ahead and steal the share really quick.
Okay.
I'm going to override your screen share.
Okay.
Okay, so you should be able to see the Genealogy Center page. And what I want to point out is, first of all, genealogy community, this is where that YouTube is. And then also, if you go to events, you can see our upcoming events and the past ones for handouts. So our next one is on Tuesday, June 16th, and it's exploring the Indiana State Archives online resources. So make sure to join us for that. Claire Horton's going to be joining us. She's the Deputy Director at the Indiana State Archives, so that's going to be a really interesting talk. So again, Tuesday, June 16th at 2:30 p.m. And then join us again next Thursday for another adventure with Adobe Photoshop Elements. So this is where we come to those color photographs. So make sure to register for this program as well. And we hope to see you Tuesday and Thursday. And it looks like people are saying thank you and they've enjoyed the presentation. So thank you everybody for joining us again. Thank you for taking your time on a lovely Thursday evening. At least it's lovely here. So we appreciate you coming and joining us. Hi, I thought I'd turn on my video, say goodbye. So thank you again. And remember, Tuesday, June 16th at 2:30, and then next Thursday at 6:30. So thank you and have a wonderful evening.